Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how I do a clear coat of resin on top of my acrylic pours. The first thing I do is I always warm up my parts A and B in a warm water bath. And I fill up this tote about halfway full of water. You don't want to add too much water. You don't want water getting into your parts A or part B of your resin. And I'm using Stone Coat Countertops Art Coat resin. And I just warm my resin up for about 15 minutes in the water bath before I use it, and that just helps it have less bubbles and flow more nicely. And I use water that's the temperature of my shower. I also wanted to show you how I strengthen the back of my canvases before I put the resin on. I just cut up some cardboard and I just make square or rectangle shapes. It doesn't have to be perfect, as you can see. And what you want to do is flip your canvas over, and on the back side you can see if you push down right there, there's a little bit of room, and you can shimmy your cardboard under there and it'll fit nice and snug, and that's going to give you extra support on your canvas because the resin is heavy, and if your canvas isn't supported on the back, it's going to pool in the center when you add your resin, and that's going to make it not adhere to the sides of your canvas. So you want to do this step so you don't have to add an additional clear coat. This isn't the piece I'm going to show you in the video, but I wanted to show you on this piece what I was talking about with the pooling in the center. I didn't reinforce the back of this canvas before I did resin, and it pooled in the center. And what happened was it just got heavy, and the resin didn't stick to the sides because it was pooling. Before you add your clear coat of resin to your acrylic pour, you want to make sure you tape the back, and I just use basic painter's tape. And just make sure I get the back taped up so no resin drips stay on the back of your canvas. So I just laid out two long pieces of wax paper. I've got my acrylic pour right here, and I've got it set on. These little ice cream containers work really good to hold up something. You could hold a coaster on there, or 4 of them. You can hold up a painting, and then as you can see, I taped up the back. You can kind of see some of my. Then I'm gonna do this one. These are all acrylic pours, and none of these have silicone. It's all just paint and Floetrol. I don't even add water to my paint. I just do 1/3 paint, 2/3 Floetrol, and sometimes, most of the time, it turns out pretty awesome. Whoops! I also have my little torch right here to pop the bubbles, and some tweezers in case any dust or debris gets inside on top of the resin after you pour it on there, to keep it dust and debris free. I could fit a 12 by 12 painting and 4 coasters inside here pretty easy. I know this is upside down, but this is a 41 quart tote, and I got this at Walmart. For you resin, you want to make sure everything's level. I can see right here that this one's not level, so you want to grab your level and make sure everything is perfect before you resin, because if you got, resin is self-leveling, so if you're a little bit off, everything's going to want to run off to that side that's not level. I'm just going to keep checking these and make sure they're level really quickly before I mix up my resin. For this project, I'm using the Stone Coat Countertops Art Coat resin, and you want to make sure that you dry the containers off really well when you take them out of the water bath, just to make sure you don't get any water in your container. That would not be good. Resin does not like water. And I just went in and poured equal parts A and B into my measuring cup. I'm pretty sure for this one I did 6 ounces of resin and 6 ounces of hardener. And then after you get those poured in your cup, you want to stir it up for 3 minutes. And you want to be extra sure that you're measuring correct amounts. If you add too much hardener, it's not going to set up right. And if you add too much resin, it's not going to set up right. So it has to be perfectly equal parts A and B. Some people even use a digital scale to weigh out their parts A and B, but I just make sure that I eyeball it right on the mark, 6 ounces of A and 6 ounces of B, and then it works out. So now you just stir for 3 minutes. I sped this up so you guys didn't have to sit through 3 minutes of stirring, but it looks like I'm stirring way faster than I actually was. And you just want to be sure to scrape the inside of your cup, the bottom, your stick or your stirring apparatus, whatever you're using to stir up your resin. Make sure you get every single part of the cup stirred and get that resin well incorporated. If you don't mix it up properly, it's not going to set up right, and then you're just going to have to do another flood coat on top. So just take the time and make sure you stir it up really well. Make sure it's well incorporated. Like I said, I always do stir it for 3 minutes, but sometimes I actually do an extra minute just to be extra sure that it's well incorporated. So I have everything all stirred up, and now I'm ready to add resin to my acrylic pours. I always just start with a circle in the middle, and then I kind of add more. I found for my 12 by 12 canvases, about 5 ounces of resin is good for a flood coat, and then for the little 4 by 4 ceramic tile coasters, about 1 ounce of resin is what you need to get a good coat on there. And you'll see the resin starting to spread out on its own. So I usually wait a few moments and let it kind of spread out on its own before I take my hand and go in and start spreading it around. So you can take your popsicle stick and start in the middle and work your way out to the side. You always want to make sure the top of your acrylic pour is covered, and you can worry about the edges later. You just want to make sure the top always has a nice coat before you worry about the edges. And so you just kind of take your popsicle stick and just smooth it all out. There's no, real method. You just kind of can feel if it's too thick in one spot, then slide it over to where it's thinner, where you think it needs a little bit more resin. And once you think that the top looks well and covered, you can take your finger and go along the sides of your canvas and cover the edges. And you can feel it with your gloved finger that oh, there's a dry spot right here. I'm going to add a little bit more resin. You can just take your finger and dip the resin off the wax paper and wipe it along the edge there. Now I'm going on to the coasters, and I'm just taking my gloved finger and using my hand to smooth out the top. So you just go across and make sure all the surface area on the top is covered on each coaster, and then you move on to the sides. This coaster was giving me a little bit of a hard time. My gloves were super sticky, so it kept falling off of my little stand I had it on. So if your gloves get super sticky, you can switch them out. And after you know that the top's well uncovered on these coasters, you can move to the side. Just take your finger and feel along the edge. If you feel any dry spots, add a little bit more resin. And like I said, you can feel the difference if there's resin on the sides of the edges on your coaster. You can definitely feel your fingers not going to glide as nicely on the edge there if there's no resin. So just add a little bit more if you feel a dry spot. So now I'm just going along with some extra clear and adding it to the edges of the coasters just to make sure that it's well uncovered. Coasters, it's one of those things you want to make sure that you don't miss any spots. And it's not a big deal if you have to go back and do an extra flood coat, but it's nice if you can get it right the first time on the coasters. So I just take my finger and go along on the edges, make sure that there's no dry spots. Now I have everything nice and covered. I'm going to go in with my heat torch and pop any bubbles. And before you turn on your heat torch, you want to point it away from your art projects for about 5 seconds just to get out any dust boogers or dust debris that's up in the torch. And you just want to hit the top of your piece. Make sure you don't stay on one spot too long. You don't want to torch your resin. You're just looking for any bubbles. What I like to do is kind of squat down and look at everything from all angles, just to make sure that I didn't miss any spots on my acrylic pour. And I also like to go in with a little extra clear and just do a dollop on the corners, just to be, you know, extra sure that I didn't miss any spots and there's no dry spots, so I don't have to go back again and do a second clear coat. Now I'm going to go back in with my torch again and pop any bubbles. I like to hit it with my torch about every 15 minutes after I've made sure that everything's good and covered with resin. And I actually emailed Stone Coat Countertops and asked them how long after you've poured your clear coat on can you pop bubbles, and they said 90 minutes. So if you're using this resin, you have about, 90 minutes to pop any bubbles that may show up. And everything looked good to me. There was no dust or debris. So I just put my little Sterilite tote on there and it's ready to cure for 24 hours. So it's been 24 hours and now I'm going to show you guys what these look like in the sunlight. This one is my 12 by 12 acrylic pour. I used color shift paint in this and the resin just made that paint just really come alive. It's so pretty in person. This is how the coasters turned out. I love the gold. The resin really made it come alive and it's shimmer and shiny. And that's just the Artist Loft Flow acrylic, gold metallic in the big bottle. This one had a little bit of texture when the acrylic pour dried, but I decided to put some resin on it anyway, and it didn't turn out too bad. I still like it. Turned out okay. This one's one of my favorites. It reminds me of a brain. I just love how that gold shimmers on there. I hope you guys like this video. I know when I was starting out with resin on top of my acrylic pours, I watched so many videos. So if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time. Bye.